It's very difficult for a young athlete suddenly to get a multi-million-pound contract or become a celebrity, because it affects them, and it affects the people around them. The people around them change because they've suddenly, instead of this being friends with this kid who's good at sport, they're friends with this superstar who's rich, can introduce them to things, can do things. And it becomes a very heady mixture. I remember talking to David Beckham at Man United about being an ordinary person with an extraordinary talent. So I would say to him, David, you're an ordinary person with an extraordinary talent. You have got an extraordinary talent. He was a lovely player, lovely man, by the way, a lovely player. But you're an ordinary person. When you go out this training ground, make sure you stop at those red lights. You're not that extraordinary, you can go through red lights. So it's about keeping balance. What do you want? Do you want to be a celebrity? Or do you want to be the best player you can be? If you want to be the best player you can be, forget that. Concentrate on your training.
So with someone like David, like, what was the process of work? Like, how much was based on performance and how much is based on the outside world? Because I mean, someone like him, like, it's this constant thing. He steps outside and he's surrounded by paparazzi and fans and stuff. Like, how much work's based on each thing?
Well, the work is based on his sporting performance. The outside thing only gets included when it affects his sporting performance. So he was actually very good at dealing with it. Because he was one who evolved dramatically quickly because of his wife. But he was good at dealing with it. But you learn to see the signs of change. So, for example, I remember being at FC20 and we had an 18-year-old boy who was very good. And he was a humble boy, a nice boy. He used to come in to the training ground in an old beat-up Volkswagen, which was rather nice. And he got his first contract, which was, I think, €1 million or something like that. And the next day he came up in the biggest, shiniest car you've ever seen. And that triggered my thinking, oh my goodness me, there's going to be a problem. And he was out of the game in 2 years.
Wow. So can that be a thing, too much too soon for these young athletes?
It is, unless they get good advice. It's still the best thing that an athlete can have is 2 good parents.
So if you were to try to convince a coach or even an athlete to take up sports psychology, how would you explain it to them?
Well, I would explain it to them by demonstrating the power of the mindset on performance. Because if I say to a coach, is it your aim to create excellent football players or rugby players or basketball players or whatever the coach is coaching? And they say yes. So I said, just describe to me, give me words that describe an excellent player in your sport. And they'd give me a page of words, and I'd say, let me just do something, and I'd circle the words, leave some uncircled, circle the words. And I said, what's the difference between the two? And one, the circled words would be dominate the page, and they said the circled words are all mental, attitude. I'd say, there you go. So if you describe Cristiano Ronaldo, you finish up with a page of mental attributes, courage to perform, whatever. So that's the way I convince them. So how much do you teach the 3 words that are not mental, and how much do you teach the mental? Well, we don't teach the mental. There you go.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, if I was to think just then when you said about an athlete, most of them would be mental. Yeah, when someone like myself or a normal person thinks of an athlete, we think training in the gym, practicing reps, whatever it is, but that's just such a small percentage. It's so interesting, and we were saying before this, we was interviewing a sports psychologist recently, it just blows my mind, and it's just interesting to see athletes starting to work with them. In the Olympics and the Olympic athletes, would you say that 99% of those guys are working with sports psychologists?
Not 99%, but a lot more. A lot more. I've worked with British swimming now for the last 8 years, since London, which was a very disappointing Olympics. I was brought in immediately after London to create a winning environment, to change the environment. And we went to Rio and had the most successful one, and then we went to Tokyo and had an even more successful one. And I think that some sports are now far more familiar with sports psychologists, and they've got them embedded in the system.
One of the things that this was on the website, your own website, was the word psychology. We just spoke about this, can be off-putting for people. So you like to use the word stretch and stretching performance. Like, what do you mean when you say stretching performance? Well,
psychology for many people means shrink, and that's an unfortunate connection that's I found when the newspapers first got some understanding of what I was doing. So my first headline in the newspaper was "Shrink Talks to Football Players." So I don't see myself as a shrink at all. I see myself as a stretch, because I'm only focused in their performance. What can I do to help you perform better? So I might stretch it 1 or 2%, which at the highest level is quite significant. I actually think it probably is more than that, but you never know. You can't tell. You can't measure it, can you?
Well, that's something that I was going to go on to next, is that extra 1 to 2%. It is an extra 1 or 2%, but how much more, how important is that extra little bit?
Ooh. It can be everything. It can be everything. But I think what it is an extra 1 or 2% on the surface. But underneath, what happens when a sports psychologist works with an athlete is we change the way they think. We give them another language, so that when they're faced with something, when they're not with us, they have something to go to, a sort of language like fighter or victim. So many athletes who I've worked with in the past, who see me now and lovely in the chat, say, I find myself just in life dealing with the kids or whatever at home, and I'm going, am I a fighter or a victim? So it actually creates a framework for thinking more positively about life.
As many of you know, we are independent creators and filmmakers, but there is a massive attack on us right now. Traditional media over the last few years has started to slowly die. They are no longer the independent voice that you first thought they were. That's why we've created Mulligan Brothers Patreon. We've built something special for our most dedicated supporters, and I want to break it down for you real quick. The supporter tier gets you ad-free early access to both video and audio versions of Mulligan Brothers interviews 24 hours before it goes public. The executive tier gets you everything that a supporter tier gets, plus more. Exclusive interviews and behind the scenes content, walk and talks, daily routines, unreleased interviews, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And finally, the executive producer tier. Everything from the supporter tier and the executive tier, plus exclusive perks. Access to our treatment packages. Be the first to see which guests are coming up and get insight into the topics we'll be discussing before anyone else. And you'll even get an executive producer credit on every single documentary that we make. So if you've ever wanted to support the Mulligan Brothers mission of inspiring change so we can go around the world and get these stories that nobody else will, this is exactly how you do it. Go to patreon.com/Mulligan Brothers or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Join the community and help us inspire change.